The smell of garlic frying in lard at 6 in the morning. The sound of a comal warming on the back burner before anyone has spoken. The first thing you noticed walking in was heat and the soft slap of hands shaping something on a wooden board. Number 14 on this list traveled from a paper bag to a school lunchbox every morning for decades. Number 8 sat in a pot on the back burner of every Mexican kitchen in Texas. Number 3 on this list arrived in a glass bottle nobody else in the neighborhood would touch. None of these foods are strange to families that grew up with them, but step into any other kitchen and they look like instructions in a language no one else reads. Hit subscribe before this list ends. Here are the 20 foods that are normal in Mexican homes, but nowhere else. Number 20. Crema on everything. Crema. Rich Mexican cream on everything. A glass jar with a handwritten label sat on the top shelf of your grandmother's refrigerator in San Antonio for as long as you could remember. Inside was a thick, pale liquid that looked like it should be sour, but it was not. It was tangy, a little sweet, almost buttery, and it ran in slow ribbons off the spoon. Crema is not sour cream. It carries about 30% fat, where American sour cream sits at 20%, which is why it does not curdle when it hits a hot plate of enchiladas or a bowl of pozole. Your abuela drizzled it over scrambled eggs at breakfast, over black beans at lunch, over a baked potato at dinner. You grew up thinking every kitchen had a jar like that. They did not. You learned it the day a friend opened your refrigerator in 1992 and asked what the strange milk was for. Pause for 1 second. Number 19. Maruchan ramen with lime and Valentina. A plastic foam cup, a kettle on the stove, and a small green lime sliced in half on the cutting board. The kid pried open the foil lid, poured the boiling water in, waited the 4 minutes the package told him to wait, and then ignored the seasoning packet completely. Out came the lime, squeezed until the rind cracked. Out came the bottle of Valentina with the yellow label, tipped over the noodles until the broth turned the color of sunset. The flavor that finished it was not the chicken powder in the pouch, but the puya chiles from Jalisco that build the sauce. Around 900 Scoville units, sharp and rounded in a way Tabasco is not. The Tamazula company in Guadalajara has been bottling Valentina since 1960. Every Mexican kid in this country eats ramen this way. Every other kid drinks it from the cup as it was packaged. The first time he watched a friend skip the lime, he thought there had been a mistake at the factory. A paper plate of cold sandia, cut into thick pink triangles, sat on your kitchen counter in El Paso on a hot Saturday in July of 1989. A salt shaker sat next to it. A bottle of Valentina sat next to that. Your grandfather walked by, picked up a slice, sprinkled salt across the pink, then crossed it with 3 slow drips of red hot sauce. He bit into it without ceremony. The juice ran down his wrist. To anyone else, this looks like vandalism done to fruit. To a Mexican household, it is the only correct way to eat melon. The salt brings the sweetness up. The chile catches the back of the throat, and the lime juice in the sauce keeps the cold edge sharp. It works on mango, on cucumber, on jicama, and on pineapple. What most people miss is that the salt has to go on first, before the sauce, or the chile slides off. Outside Mexican homes, watermelon goes plain on a plate, and your grandfather would not understand the point of that. Number 17. Bolillos used as a utensil. A brown paper bag of warm bolillos sat on the kitchen table at 6:30 every evening in a house in the Rio Grande Valley. In 1986, the abuela bought them daily from the panaderia 3 blocks over. Never twice, never the day before. The bolillo is a small football of bread with a hard, blistered crust and a soft, almost cottony inside. It is not a side. It is the way the meal gets eaten. Tear off the heel, scoop the frijoles, Soap up the caldo, mop the salsa from the plate before it stains. Hand a bolillo to a kid raised outside this tradition and they will look for butter or for a sandwich filling. Hand it to a Mexican kid and they will tear it open and start scooping before they sit down. The bread is cheap, simple, and made to be torn by hand and used in place of a fork. That is the whole design. Number 16. Mexican Coke in a glass bottle. A small wooden crate of green glass bottles sat in the corner of a tiendita on Guadalupe Street in San Antonio in 1985, and a paper opener hung on a string from the cooler. The bottle was thick, 12 fluid ounces. The cap was metal, and the drink inside was sweetened with the cane sugar from Mexico, not the high fructose corn syrup that took over the American formula in the early 1980s. There is a flavor difference, and a household raised on the Mexican version can taste it inside 3 sips. The grandmother bought a case for every reunion, every birthday, every Sunday lunch. The bottles were too cold for small hands, and the older cousins opened them on the edge of the kitchen counter. Today the bottles run $2 to $3 at the gas station, double a normal can. The reason families pay it is not nostalgia. It is that nothing else tastes the same with carnitas. Number 15. Fruit cups with the chamoy and tajin. A clear plastic cup filled to the rim with cubes of mango, watermelon, pineapple, jicama, and cucumber sat on the corner of your kitchen counter in Edinburgh, Texas, on a Sunday afternoon in 1991. Your grandmother had cut everything that morning, squeezed 2 limes over the top, then drizzled the chamoy from a tall glass bottle until the dark red syrup ran down through the fruit and pooled at the bottom. Tajin, the chile lime seasoning that has been bottled in Jalisco since 1985, came last, sprinkled out of the small red shaker until every cube wore a fine red dust. You ate it with a toothpick until your lips stained red and your fingertips smelled like lime and chile for the rest of the day. To outsiders, this looks like dessert someone ruined. To anyone raised in a Mexican home, it is the most refreshing thing on a hot day, and a fruit bowl without chamoy looks unfinished. The same combination shows up in cucumber spears at the gas station and in mango on a stick from a vendor on the corner. What most people miss is that the salt and chile actually pull the sweetness of the fruit forward. They do not cover it. Your abuela did not invent it. Her own grandmother had served it at the same kitchen table in Reynosa, Tamaulipas, a generation earlier. The recipe for chamoy goes back to pickled fruit, salt, sugar, and chile, an old preservation method that was never about taste at first, only survival in the days before refrigeration. The fact that it became a daily snack for an entire culture is an accident of history. The fact that it never crossed into other kitchens is not. People raised on plain fruit see the dust and the syrup and assume it must be too much. Your abuela in Edinburgh would say they have never been hot enough. Number 14. Pan dulce for breakfast every day. The metal tray came out of the oven at the panaderia at 5 in the morning. The bag was on the kitchen counter in Houston by 6:30. Inside were conchas with their pink and yellow shells of crumbled topping, a few orellas curled like fans, 2 marranitos shaped like little brown pigs, sweet and dancey and smelling of molasses. A mug of café de olla sat next to the bag. The grandmother dipped the concha into the coffee until the shell softened and the bread underneath turned dark. She had done this every morning for 40 years. So had her mother. So had the lady down the block. In other American homes, the morning is cereal in a bowl, or an English muffin, or a granola bar grabbed on the way out the door. In a Mexican home, it is sweet bread baked the same morning, eaten with both hands, dipped slow. A kid raised this way learns the names of every shape in the bag: the concha, the cuerno, the marranito, the oreja, the elote, before they learn to read. A small green basket of limes sat on the windowsill above the kitchen sink in a house in San Diego, refilled every Wednesday after a trip to the swap meet. The grandmother cut a lime open before she sat down to eat. Lime went on the soup, on the rice, on the avocado, on the pork, on the chicken, on the beer, on the watermelon, on the chips, on the popcorn. There was a small saucer of lime wedges at every meal in that house, and there had been since 1962. The acid wakes everything up, brightens the fat, sharpens the salt, and makes a heavy plate feel lighter. I have watched friends raised outside the tradition use lime in a margarita and a few cocktails and call it a day. People raised in a Mexican home cannot picture rice without it. The kid who grew up squeezing lime over his eggs found out at a sleepover at age 10 that nobody else does this, and felt for the first time slightly foreign in his own country. Pause 1 second. Number 12. Abuelita chocolate dissolved in hot milk. A round disc of dark Mexican chocolate, scored into 8 wedges and wrapped in yellow and red paper, sat in a cabinet above the stove in a house in Houston in 1988. The brand was launched in Mexico in 1939, and the grandmother had used the same wrapper since the kids were small. She broke off 2 wedges, dropped them into a saucepan of warm milk, and stirred slowly with a wooden molinillo until the chocolate melted into a thick, foamy drink the color of wet earth. It was sweetened with cane sugar and laced with cinnamon and almond, and it tasted nothing like the sugary cocoa packets American kids stirred into water at the same age. She poured it into a clay mug and handed it to whoever was at the table. There was always a bolillo on the side. The kids tore it in half and dipped it. The chocolate soaked through the bread. They ate it slow because nothing about this drink was meant to be rushed. Outside Mexican homes, hot chocolate comes from a paper packet. Number 11. Caldo de pollo for every cold and bad day. A blue and white enamel pot the size of a small basin sat on the back burner of your stove in San Antonio, simmering since 10 in the morning. Inside was a whole hen cut into pieces, large chunks of carrot, celery, zucchini, half a head of cabbage, 2 ears of corn cut into thick rounds, garlic, onion, a fistful of cilantro tied with kitchen string. The broth was clear, golden, and smelled like every grandmother in Texas had cooked it at the same time. It had been on the stove since you first complained of a sore throat at 7 that morning. By noon, the bowl was in front of you with a halved lime, a small dish of chopped onion and cilantro, a stack of warm tortillas, and a side of red rice. Your abuela said 2 words to you, and one of them was eat. There was no flu medicine in the cabinet. There was no cough syrup in the drawer. The medicine was the soup. She believed it like a fact, and so did her mother before her, and so did every neighbor on the block. American doctors called chicken soup a folk remedy with mild benefits, mostly hydration and the steam helping a stuffy nose. A grandmother in a Mexican kitchen has a different rating system. She has fed this same soup to every cold, every fever, every broken heart, every newborn baby brought home from the hospital, every uncle who lost a job, every cousin who got divorced. The pot does not stop. Even on days when nobody is sick, the soup is on the stove because somebody might walk in cold. What most people miss about caldo de pollo is that it was never about the chicken. It was about the act of caring being long, slow, and visible from the moment you walked in. 4 hours of simmering is 4 hours of someone holding you in mind. The tradition is older than the Spanish, older than the conquest, older than anybody alive can trace. What is new is the family in San Antonio in 1988, eating from a pot their great-grandmother would have recognized. Outside this tradition, sick days mean a can of soup and a saltine cracker. Inside it, sick days means somebody loves you enough to simmer a hen for 4 hours. Number 10. Salsa made fresh every single day. A black volcanic rock molcajete, the size of a soup bowl, sat on the counter next to the stove in a kitchen in Phoenix, scarred from 40 years of grinding. The grandmother roasted 3 Roma tomatoes and 2 serrano peppers on a dry comal until the skins blistered black, then dropped them in the molcajete with a clove of garlic, a pinch of salt, and a few sprigs of cilantro. She ground them with the stone pestle in slow circles until the salsa was thick and rough, never smooth, never pureed. It went on the table with every meal. The next day she made another one. There was no jar in the refrigerator with a logo on it, no twist-off cap, no bottled salsa from a supermarket aisle. She believed bottled salsa was a kind of confession. Outside Mexican homes, salsa is a cheap dip from a glass jar. Inside one, it is a fresh sauce that gets made twice a day and has never been the same recipe twice. Number 9. Sopa de fideo. A small bag of thin, broken vermicelli noodles sat next to the stove in a kitchen in McAllen, Texas, in 1990. Opened with kitchen scissors that morning. The grandmother poured a few tablespoons of oil into a hot pot, added the dry noodles, and toasted them until they turned a deep amber, almost burnt looking. Then she poured in a blender of tomato, onion, and garlic, stirred until it sizzled, and topped it off with chicken broth from the pot of caldo on the back burner. 12 minutes later, it was supper. A bowl of fideo with a squeeze of lime, a sprinkle of crumbled queso fresco, a torn warm tortilla on the side. It cost almost nothing, less than $1 a bag at the tiendita on the corner. Outside Mexican homes, fideo does not exist as a category, and the noodles in the bag with the cellophane window stay invisible on the supermarket shelf. Number 8. Frijoles on the back burner all day. A clay olla the color of wet brick sat on the back burner of a stove in East Los Angeles in 1984, holding 2 pounds of pinto beans simmering in water, with a quarter onion, 2 cloves of garlic, and a bay leaf. The grandmother started them at 7 in the morning and let them cook low and slow until 2 in the afternoon, by which time the broth had turned dark and silky, and the beans were soft enough to crush against the roof of the mouth with the tongue alone. Salt went in at the very end. She served them in a small bowl with a few slices of avocado, a sprinkle of crumbled cheese, a torn corn tortilla. The next morning she fried what was left in lard with a chopped onion until the beans turned thick and pasty, and the kitchen smelled like every other Mexican kitchen on the block. Refried beans went on plates next to scrambled eggs at breakfast, into bolillos as moletes at lunch, on a tostada with crema and salsa at dinner. There was always a pot of beans somewhere in the kitchen. Outside Mexican homes, beans come from a can with a label. A package of plain American beef hot dogs sat in the refrigerator door of a house in San Antonio. They had been bought for 99 cents at the tiendita on Saturday. On a Tuesday morning, the grandmother sliced 2 of them into thin coins, fried them in a pan with a little oil until the edges curled and crisped, then poured 4 beaten eggs over the top and stirred until the whole mess came together into a soft scramble. She scooped it onto a plate, set a stack of warm tortillas next to it, and called the kids to the table. They built tacos out of it with a spoon of salsa and a bit of crema. Huevos con salchicha is a 5-ingredient breakfast that exists in nearly every Mexican household, and almost no other kitchen in this country thinks to put a hot dog into a scrambled egg. The dish is cheap, fast, and built around what was already in the refrigerator on a school morning. Outside Mexican homes, hot dogs go in a bun. Inside one, they go in a tortilla. Number 6. Aguas frescas in a glass jar on the counter. A vitrolero the size of a small fish tank sat on your kitchen counter in San Antonio every Sunday in summer, filled to the top with a bright red liquid the color of a sunset. It was agua de Jamaica, made from dried hibiscus flowers steeped in hot water, sweetened with cane sugar, then chilled with ice, and a few slices of lime. Your grandmother had been making it the same way since 1971. The next week she would make horchata, the rice milk drink with cinnamon and almond. And the week after that she would make tamarindo, the dark sweet sour drink that tastes like nothing else on the planet. There were always 3 or 4 pitchers in rotation through the summer, and a small ladle hooked over the side of the jar so anybody could pour their own. The drinks were made from things that cost almost nothing. A bag of dried hibiscus flowers from the tiendita on the corner ran $2 and lasted a month. A pound of rice and a stick of cinnamon made 4 pitchers of horchata. A small bag of tamarind pods soaked overnight became a gallon of agua by morning. Your grandmother did not call this hospitality. She called it Sunday. The drinks were on the counter because somebody might come by the house, and nobody who came by was leaving without a glass. What most people miss about aguas frescas is that the drink is the host. Your grandmother did not have to stop her cooking to greet you. The vitrolero greeted you the moment you walked in. The tradition goes back centuries. The Spanish brought rice and almonds in the 1500s. The Mesoamericans had their own drinks of corn and cocoa, and the layers stacked into the agua fresca culture that lives in every Mexican kitchen today. Outside this tradition, summer drinks are soda from a can, or iced tea from a powder, or a sports drink from a plastic bottle on the gas station shelf. Your grandmother in San Antonio would offer you any of those if you asked, but she would not understand why. The vitrolero on her counter answered the question before you could ask it. A small enamel pan of brothy pinto beans sat on the back burner of a stove in a house in Brownsville in 1987, left over from the night before. The grandmother brought them to a soft boil. Then, she cracked 2 eggs directly into the pot, covered the lid for 4 minutes, and pulled the eggs out floating in the bean broth. The whites set, the yolks still soft. She slid the whole bowl across the table with a spoon, a torn tortilla, and a few slices of jalapeno from a jar. Huevos ahogados. En frijoles is the kind of breakfast a grandmother makes when she does not feel like making breakfast. Outside Mexican homes, eggs go in a pan with butter. Inside one, they go directly into whatever soup or stew is closest, and the broth becomes the seasoning. Number 4, saladitos in a small plastic bag. A small handful of dried, salted plums the size of marbles sat in a clear plastic bag at the bottom of a kitchen drawer in El Paso, brought back from a trip across the border the month before for around $2. The plum was wrinkled, dark, dusted with salt and chile, and tasted like every flavor pulled to the maximum. Sour, salty, sweet, hot, all at once. The grandmother kept them for the kids. She would drop one into a glass of cold water with a squeeze of lime and let the kid drink it down to the bottom, where the plum was waiting. Other kids in the neighborhood would try one, make a face, and never ask again. Mexican kids would eat them like candy. The flavor combination is not built for a palate raised on Skittles and Jolly Ranchers. It was built for a palate raised on chamoy, on tajin, on lime, on salt. Saladitos are still sold in small bags at every tiendita in Texas and California. Outside those stores, they do not exist. Number 3. Jarritos and other Mexican sodas. A wooden crate of glass bottles in flavors that did not exist in American refrigerators sat in the corner of a tiendita on Guadalupe Street in San Antonio in 1983. Tamarindo, the color of brown sugar, sweet and tart at the same time. Jamaica, the color of ruby. Mandarina, the color of a school bus. Sangria. the color of red wine but without alcohol. Toronja, the pale yellow grapefruit version. The grandmother bought a different flavor every Friday, and the cousins fought over which one. Jarritos was founded in Mexico City in 1950, was sweetened with real cane sugar, and tasted like the fruit on the label, not like a synthetic copy. Outside Mexican homes, soda is brown or orange or clear or maybe purple. Inside one, soda is a row of bottles in colors a paint store would envy. And the kid who grew up drinking them spent his whole adolescence disappointed by every American beverage aisle. A heavy ceramic baking dish came out of the oven on Good Friday in a house in Laredo every spring without fail, smelling of brown sugar, cinnamon, and toasted bread. Inside was Capirotada, a layered pudding of toasted Bolillo slices soaked in piloncillo syrup, scattered with raisins, peanuts, and the pecans, and topped with melted cheese. The grandmother served it warm in small bowls. Each ingredient on the plate carried a meaning. The bread was the body of Christ. The syrup was his blood. The whole cinnamon sticks were the wood of the cross. The cloves were the nails. The melted cheese was the holy shroud. She did not explain this to the kids for the first 10 years she made it. They figured it out the year their grandfather died in 1990. And she told the story over the dish. Capirotada appears in Mexican homes during Lent and Easter, especially on the Fridays when the family abstains from meat. Outside this tradition, no other family in this country eats bread pudding with cheese on top. Number 1. Tamales at Christmas. A stack of corn husks soaked in a white bowl of water sat on the kitchen table in a house in San Antonio on the morning of December 23rd, every year. Since before the youngest cousin was born, the grandmother had a 30-pound bag of masa on the counter, a slow-cooked pork shoulder pulled apart in a pot, 3 different chile sauces in 3 different bowls, and a red plastic bucket of olives and raisins. By 8 in the morning, 4 daughters and 7 granddaughters were in the kitchen with their sleeves rolled up, spreading masa onto husks with the back of a spoon, dropping in the pork, folding the husks, stacking them into a steamer pot the size of a snare drum. They steamed for 3 hours. The kitchen smelled of pork fat, masa, and chile, and the windows fogged from the inside. By the time the first batch came out at noon, an aunt was already crying about her own mother, and the youngest cousin was eating one straight from the steamer with her hands. What most people miss about tamales at Christmas is that they are not a dish in a Mexican home. They are the holiday itself. The work that builds them is the holiday. The hours of folding, the storytelling around the table, the radio playing rancheras, the older women correcting the younger ones, the kids running through the kitchen and getting in the way. Outside Mexican homes, Christmas dinner is a turkey or a ham. Inside one, Christmas dinner is 200 tamales, made by hand, eaten over 3 days, sent home with every cousin in foil packets. The tradition goes back to before the conquest, when tamales were food for ceremonies and offerings to Aztec gods, and it survived 400 years of colonization, 2 centuries of migration, and a border that tried to draw a line through it. The grandmother in San Antonio did not know the history. She only knew that her own mother had taught her in 1948, and that her daughters were teaching her granddaughters now, and that as long as the steamer pot came out the day before Christmas, nothing important had been lost. These foods are still alive in kitchens that are passed down without a recipe card. The grandmother did not write any of this down. Her daughters watched her hands and learned. Her granddaughters watch them now. The smell of garlic in lard, the sound of a comal warming, the soft slap of masa on a wooden board. I have stood in kitchens like this, and none of it has been forgotten. Tell me in the comments which one your abuela still makes, and which one your mother is teaching you to make next. The foods on this list are normal in Mexican homes because somebody loved you enough to keep cooking them.